Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the reading of a one-shot entitled Cosmic Thread Through Our Souls. Here's the summary. Bakugou Katsuki was born with a soul mark on his calf that bonded him to Midoriya Izuku, a mark that burned him every time he hurt his soulmate. Not that it ever stopped him. He was just careful about doing it. But there's a reason the mark burns. Fate is warning him of her displeasure, and ignoring the burn for too long during battle trials results in Fate taking drastic action. Suddenly, Bakugo has only blackened flesh where the mark used to be. Midoriya's arm looks as if he never had a mark in the first place, and Markless Todoroki Shouto steps up to help Midoriya through the difficulty of suddenly losing a soul bond. When Todoroki and Midoriya clash during the sports festival, Fate decides to interfere again, though for a much nicer reason this time. Again, this is a one-shot with just over 10,000 words. I hope you all enjoy. Katsuki's patience is gone, frayed, snapped, and then blinked out of existence thanks to the damn nerd's performance in their first combat class. There's no way Deku, with his skinny arms, weak muscles, and timid demeanor, is beating him, except he is, evading blows and countering Katsuki's attacks as if he's even remotely at Katsuki's level. And the longer his luck held out, the more Katsuki's patience was worn away, until snap. So Katsuki doesn't think he can be held responsible for what he does next, or even should be, really. He's just returning the status quo, bringing things back to their natural order, after all. It's a public fucking service he's performing by shoving the nerd back in his place, he tells himself as he raises his arm and aims squarely at Deku. His inner left calf burns, a warning Katsuki has no intention of heeding as he loops his finger through the pin on his gauntlet and pulls. The blast is huge. It throws Deku back, blowing a hole in the side of the building, and Katsuki grins maliciously, even as the mark on his calf burns and burns and burns, the pain increasing as he continues to advance on Deku. Instead of tempering the anger, the pain fuels it. Fuels his utter disgust at his own damn body, trying to tell him to take it easy on the nerd just because Fate had an off day and gave Deku a matching mark so strong that bile rises in his throat. It's not because he's harming Deku, inflicting damage beyond anything he's attempted to before, trying to make his soulmate hurt worse than he ever has, with his palms alone. Definitely not. But as Katsuki executes a flawless twist midair and detonates an explosion right against Deku's back, the pain in his calf reaches a new level of agony and he screams, landing in a heap instead of on the balls of his feet as he intends. He's sure the sizzling of his skin is audible, although whether anyone else could hear it over the agonized yelling he's doing is another matter. Deku's voice comes from somewhere nearby, sounding concerned about him in a way the nerd hasn't for quite a long time. But Katsuki doesn't have time to process how relieving that is, before he's just taken by the darkness, swarming in the edges of his vision. The infirmary wall is a very pale green color. Katsuki wonders if it was once a brighter, stronger shade, or if it has always been such a diluted one since it was first painted. The curtains around his bed are the crispest white. So are the sheets he's lying on. His blanket is more of a yellowed cream, and once again, he wonders if they started off that way or were once a perfect paper white before they were laundered a time too many and became what they are now. Recovery Girl's dark gray bun bobs around somewhere to his left, tilting this way and that as she hooks him up to a pain reliever IV and prattles on about things he can't hear, things he doesn't give a fuck about, if he's honest. What is there to care about when the flesh of his inner left calf is a dark, charred black? Fate demands that once you've betrayed your soulmate badly enough, you're branded by the sin for the rest of your life. So Katsuki knows it will never look like normal skin again. There will always, until his dying day, be a pitch-black patch of skin on his inner left calf, reminding him that he tried to harm his soulmate so grievously that Fate burned their bond to ashes and scorched the soul mark from his flesh. Katsuki closes his eyes. Recovery Girl's voice continues to chatter away in the background. His parents have been called in, apparently. He finds he doesn't particularly give a flying fuck. Everyone knows what happened. What was it that manipulative old bastard Dumbledore said in the movie about the nerd with the scar? What happened is supposed to be a secret, so naturally the whole school knows. Yeah, that's basically Katsuki's deal right now. All of Class A saw his soul mark get magically torched off his leg as punishment for deliberately and consciously hurting his soulmate. Or, well, ex-soulmate now, he supposes. There's sure as shit no corresponding mark on Deku's left forearm anymore. Where there once was an infinity symbol in Katsuki's favorite shade of orange with their initials written in each circular gap, now there's only perfectly unblemished skin, as if there was nothing there in the first place. When his old hag and Auntie Inko took them to register their bond and marks with the government office for soul bonds, part of the process included analyzing their mark, and they said that marks including infinity symbols typically represent one of the soulmates having unending patience, or the soulmates are destined to meet very young and therefore spend the rest of their lives together, which is still a finite amount of time, but whatever. All their family members agreed. Both interpretations applied to the two of them. Looking back, Katsuki knows it's the truth. Even once Deku had given up on them actually acting like soulmates and accepted that Katsuki completely rejected their bond, he remained exceedingly patient with Katsuki despite being treated like utter garbage. Yeah, Katsuki had had it pretty damn good. And now they are unmarked, Deku's unblemished flesh staring him in the face, taunting him with the loss of their soul bond. Hey, Midoriya. Katsuki hears in Icy Hot's bland monotone. Why the fuck is this asshole talking to Deku? He never talks to anyone. Thinks he's better than all of them. Resisting the urge to twist slightly in his seat and chase Peppermint away from Deku's desk takes effort, but he grits his teeth and endures because he wants to see where the fuck this is going. Hi, Todoroki-kun. Deku stutters, sounding just as surprised as Katsuki feels. Icy Hot does his second ever real human thing since school started and shuffles on the spot, just a little. A minor display of nerves before seemingly pulling himself together. I wondered if you might want to eat lunch together today. Fucking what? The nerd makes a surprised sound that registers as adorable in Katsuki's mind and sets off a fresh wave of the intermittent grief that he's been feeling since their bond broke, and he began to mourn his loss, and then replies, Why would you want that? I mean, not that I'm not grateful for the offer, and I'd really love to, but I don't really understand why you'd want to spend time with me. In his peripheral vision, Katsuki sees Peppermint tilt his head like a dumb dog. I don't see why I wouldn't, he states slowly, clearly confused. Katsuki can easily picture the nerd's utter bewilderment at the offer, a reaction that he knows he's responsible for since he's the reason Deku went without lunch invites for so many years. It shames Katsuki to realize how poorly he treated his soulmate, a feeling that only grows when he acknowledges that he's only seeing his prior behavior for the abuse and bullying it truly was, because he lost his chance with Deku. Okay, Deku says, equally slowly, caution threaded through his tone. I'd like that a lot, Todoroki. Thank you for asking. This interaction, this seemingly innocuous invitation to eat lunch together, is the beginning of utter hell for Katsuki. Peppermint is eating with Deku. Again. 8 days in a row since that first weird, awkward invitation Icy Hot extended the day after Katsuki and Deku's unmarking. The two have sat together for lunch. Sometimes Cheeks, Frogger, and Four Eyes join them, but more often than not, it's just the two of them. Icy Hot eats the same damn thing every day, which is weird as fuck and makes Katsuki wonder if the guy's even mentally sound enough to be at UA. But Deku, sure as shit doesn't seem to mind, sits there smiling so wide his cheeks round out like an overfed hamster, goddamn thrilled to be in the dead-eyed Candy Cane's company. Katsuki wants to stop watching them, he really does. But now at lunch, Deku's big green eyes sparkle in a way that's both foreign and painfully familiar to Katsuki. They haven't glittered like that since before Izuku became Deku. Bro, eat your food, shitty-haired chides gently from beside him. Despite the fact Katsuki's clearly gone down in the big dum-dum's estimation since the battle trials, he's still stuck to Katsuki's side, loyal as a dog and twice as annoying in his efforts to distract Katsuki from his new, soulmate-free reality. Grumbling, Katsuki grabs a clump of extra spicy noodles with his chopsticks and shoves them into his mouth. He chews, and after a beat, Hair for Brains pipes up again. You can't stop it from happening, Baka bro. I know it probably stings, even though you're super manly and tough, but Mito bro just... He's not your personal concern anymore, you know? And unmarking is permanent after all, whether you're the burned one or not. The title rankles Katsuki, Burned One, a moniker no one wants, but that he now has and will never be able to shake, an eternal shame. The fuck are you blabbering on about? Katsuki snaps. Did Ponytail and Ears put you up to this or something? Even before he sees Kirishima nod in his peripheral vision, he knows the answer is yes. Ponytail is devout as fuck when it comes to believing in soul bonds being sacred gifts from the universe, and Ears is her soulmate, so the two of them have been the most vocal about their distaste for him since the unmarking happened. They can fuck all the way off, Katsuki tells him hotly. I haven't even approached the nerd since... He pauses, swallowing around the damn persistent lump in his throat that only crops up when he forces himself to say the words plainly. The bond broke, besides. He makes himself add as casually as possible. Damn nerd deserves another friend, even if it is that walking candy cane. There's no need to admit the whole reason Deku so desperately does need friends is because Katsuki's kept it from happening for about a decade. But then Shitty Hair chokes on his sashimi, and Katsuki has the horrible sinking feeling that he's missing something, some vital part of the equation. Bro, Kirishima rasps, thumping his chest with his fist. Dude, that's not... Okay, they are friends right now, but Todoroki is Markless, Bakugo. I figured with the way you've been glaring at him, you knew that. I mean, not to say they're inevitably going to date because they're both Markless, but the potential was what I thought had you all twisted up. Katsuki doesn't respond, even though Kirishima does an excellent job of trailing off invitingly, because, fuck. Yeah, he's been jealous and resentful and bitter about the blossoming whatever between the nerd and Peppermint, but only because Peppermint was managing to bring out a side of Tegu that Katsuki hadn't seen since before the quirkless diagnosis came in. Maybe he was a little angry that he could have had that smile aimed his way if he'd only realized what he had before fate barbecued him, but he sure as shit had no idea that Todoroki was Markless. Available. Whether Icy Hot was born with a soulmate that also ticked the universe off to the point of their bond breaking, or was born with no mark whatsoever, the end result is the same. The guy responsible for Deku's beaming, sunshine smiles is a viable option for the nerd to date. Fuck. That's the 10th day in a row you've had cold soba for lunch, Todoroki-kun. Uraraka observes with a slightly hysterical giggle as Todoroki slides into a seat opposite Izuku. Todoroki's only answer is to slurp a large cluster of noodles into his mouth, which makes Uraraka blink rapidly as he chews almost defiantly. The scene makes Izuku smile. On the day of the battle trials, when he looked down at his arm and saw flawless, unmarred skin where his soul mark had always been, he thought he might never smile again. Yes, he had come to accept that Bakugo. It just doesn't seem right to keep calling him by a cutesy childhood nickname when he hurt Izuku so badly that fate burnt his mark off. And he would never have a relationship despite their soul bond, but the little orange infinity symbol with his initials in one loop and Bakugo's in the other was a constant for Izuku. Always there, never changing, even if Bakugo clearly wished it were otherwise. Even as he struggled to comprehend what he was seeing, Izuku knew it was the existence of the bond. He was sad to lose as opposed to the person the mark had attached him to. But that didn't take away from the fact that he was now markless. Something only 5% of Japan could claim to be. A new rare statistic for him to resent alongside the quirkless statistics he had never quite been able to forget, even now that they technically no longer applied to him. So when Todoroki sat down opposite him for their first lunch together and bluntly said, "Before I was born, fate burned my father's mark off and made my mother markless. As a result, I was also born markless. I'm not here to make friends, but I am here to be a hero, and a hero doesn't let someone suffer alone if he can do something about it." Izuku could only stare at him in dumb relief and appreciation. Then Todoroki said around a mouthful of cold soba, "Eat your katsudon, Midoriya-kun." And that was that. They've eaten lunch together every day since, and even with his somewhat distant exterior, Izuku thinks Todoroki might actually be his favorite person. He's extremely introverted and more than a little socially awkward, but there's something about his blunt refusal to be anything other than himself that Izuku really admires. Plus, when it's just the two of them, Todoroki can actually be very perceptive and compassionate. He simply won't stand for Izuku putting himself down or trying to shift blame for the unmarking onto his own shoulders, informing Izuku with a steady gaze that, if he was even a little bit at fault, his skin would be blackened and charred instead of smooth and unblemished. And that, frankly, Izuku is far too kind and selfless of a person to have caused an unmarking. What Izuku has noticed that the rest of Class A seems to have not discovered yet is that even when Todoroki's expression remains blank and unchanged, if you focus on his eyes, it's pretty easy to see how he feels about whatever's happening around him. It's so obvious that Izuku can't believe no one else has caught on because Todoroki's eyes blaze with righteous fury whenever he talks about wanting to be the very antithesis of his father. Something he only seems willing to share with Izuku on the days they sit alone. And they light up with delighted pride whenever he manages to make Izuku smile. Which happens to be a lot, Izuku thinks to himself, as Ida begins to chastise Uraraka for her commentary on Todoroki's meal choices while Sue works her way through her yaki mochi. In fact, Izuku's sure he's smiled more in the 10 or so days since Todoroki invited him to lunch than he has for the last 10 years. Noticing Uraraka's cheeks are reddening in the way they tend to when her temper is flaring, Izuku pulls himself from his thoughts and injects himself into the conversation before his friend unleashes her anger on Ida. "Did you guys see Endeavor on the morning news today? I can't believe people are actually praising him for that villain takedown. He gave a petty criminal 3rd-degree burns." If Izuku chooses that specific topic to interrupt the brewing row because it makes Todoroki's eyes glint with vindictive glee and even pulls a small, micro-expression smile from him, that's nobody's business but his own. The day of the sports festival arrives, and Katsuki is pumped. He didn't get to kick ass anywhere near as much as he wanted to when those lame-ass villains busted into the USJ, thanks to Deku and Peppermint teaming up to help All Might out. And after that dude with the gravity-defying purple hair declared war on Class A, Katsuki's been raring to go. Today is a chance to prove that he deserves to be where he is, and that it was circumstance alone that prevented him from acting like a true pro-hero during the USJ attack. Everyone but Shitty Hair has been looking at him like they doubt his skills and worthiness since the unmarking during the battle trials, and today he's going to prove all the extras dead wrong. He's going to win the whole damn thing, and no one is going to get in his way. They can all either step aside or die. Those are the only two options he's going to give his opponents today. Four Eyes burst into the waiting room. Class 1A has been assigned, bellowing about preparedness as if he's not the one showing up last minute while the majority of the class has been sitting around hypothesizing about what events they're going to be taking part in. And Katsuki immediately blocks his voice out, entirely uninterested in what a snobby legacy brat like their class president has to say about success. That asshole was born into success. He doesn't know shit about having to work to prove your worth when all he has to do is cite his family name and he'll be given the time of day by at least 10 different agencies. The exact same thing, to an even more spectacular degree, applies to Icy Hot. So Katsuki's really not sure why he can hear Deku giving him some kind of you-can-do-it speech, but he knows he doesn't want to hear that either. Icy Hot, he snaps irritably. Mismatched eyes find their way to Katsuki. Disdain and disinterest written all over the guy's face. Everyone seems to think you're the one to watch in our class. Everyone seems to believe that the inevitable winner today is you. Peppermint tilts his head in an acknowledging nod, raising his eyebrows questioningly. When Katsuki's statement doesn't send Deku off into a mumble storm about the variables and probabilities of the outcome of the event, Katsuki scowls. There was a time when the nerd would look utterly aghast and disbelieving at the mere thought that anyone could come close to Katsuki's skills. There was a time when Katsuki's mark was on his arm too, though. Yeah, well, everyone else might have discounted me as a contender, but I'm telling you now, in the end, it's going to be me versus you, and you're going to lose, Peppermint. Icy Hot nods again, sedately. Okay, Bakugo, he says, placid and calm. It just riles Katsuki up further, stokes his temper even higher. Letting out a wordless snarl of frustration, Katsuki jabs his finger in Peppermint's direction. We'll see if you're so chilled out when you're watching me take that first-place medal, asshole. Sure, replies the asshole, once again sounding like he's dosed with animal tranquilizer. Wanting to focus his mind on the upcoming competition, Katsuki makes himself ignore how much the unruffled response makes him want to blow shit up and stares intently at the table. But it doesn't stop him from hearing Deku's voice softly muttering encouragements to Peppermint. Katsuki's never getting Deku back. He knows that. Really, he does. It's just... Deku used to keep his eyes glued to Katsuki, showering him with constant reminders of how amazing he is, so it logically follows, surely, that if he does amazingly here and wins first place, Deku's attention will come back to him, right? Right? Shouto peers up at the large screen, displaying the fight brackets for the last event of the sports festival. With the way it's structured, he won't be meeting Izuku in the arena until the semifinals, when there are only 4 competitors left. His first fight is against their classmate with the elbow tape quirk Sero. It's an easy win for Shouto, who simply creates the largest wall of ice he can, immobilizing the boy quickly and cleanly. Once his victory is declared, Shouto offers his opponent a respectful nod and makes his way back into the bowels of the stadium, opting to watch Izuku's fight against a student Shouto was unfamiliar with, from the tunnels instead of rushing to the class's assigned seating area for it. While Shouto is unsure exactly what happened to Izuku during the match, clearly his opponent had some sort of persuasion or confusion quirk, but beyond that, Shouto is clueless. But he does know that he can't remember a time before that he's been so invested in someone else's success. Waiting with bated breath to see if Izuku would snap out of his trance in time to avoid stepping out of bounds was a tense, anxiety-inducing experience which is confusing Shouto. Anxiety, generally, is not considered a positive feeling. Nobody hopes for anxiety or tries to induce it. It's unpleasant and can even cause nausea and tremors. All around, anxiety isn't really enjoyable, and yet Shouto finds himself not minding one bit since he experienced it on Izuku's behalf. Contrary to what people believe, Shouto isn't stupid. Quiet, yes. Stoic and reserved, yes. Occasionally a little scatterbrained, sure. Slow on the uptake when it comes to certain social nuances, absolutely. But stupid? No. It's laughable, really, because Shouto knows his old man would have beaten the dumb right out of him if Shouto seemed unintelligent as a young child. All this goes to say is that Shouto is fully aware of why he's perfectly accepting of enduring something as unenjoyable as anxiety on Izuku's behalf. He may not have any first-hand real-life experience in most social things, but Fuyumi and Natsuo made a point of educating him on the things he missed out on by being his old man's perfect legacy before UA started. So he knows. Shouto knows he has a huge, ridiculous, adoring crush on Izuku. He knows that he's not simply attracted to the external package, but to the kind, compassionate, clever, and quirky person Izuku is on the inside, too. And he knows that even if he were to contemplate telling the other boy, potentially risking their brightly blooming friendship in the process, he certainly wouldn't think about telling him now, not so soon after Bakugo triggered the unmarking of their bond. Izuku has told him enough about his and Bakugo's history for Shouto to put the pieces together. Bakugo is, as Natsuo would say, a garbage human, and Izuku hasn't felt for the blonde boy romantically in quite some time thanks to Bakugo's heinous treatment of him. But from what Shouto's heard about having a bond only to lose it, lacking romantic or even positive feelings for Bakugo won't stop Izuku from aching with the loss for a little while. Naturally, he trusts his information implicitly since it comes from what his siblings have said about what their mother went through when their father triggered their unmarking. Shouto wasn't even born yet, still growing inside his mother at the time, and according to Natsuo, their mother had never divulged exactly what their father did to cause an unmarking, but whatever it was, it's only served to make Shouto resent his old man all the more. If his mother hadn't lost her mark during her pregnancy, Shouto would not have been born markless. Nevertheless, being markless doesn't feel like the lifelong sentence of loneliness Shouto's always thought it to be anymore. Not since Izuku lost his mark and became a viable option to him. He had thought the boy was exceedingly beautiful from the first moment he saw him, but disregarded it as soon as he realized Izuku's heart and soul were spoken for. It didn't stop the feelings from growing as he watched the boy work harder than everyone else in the class, admiring his tenacity and determination and kind heart. And it certainly didn't stop Shouto from sneaking peeks at Izuku's face whenever the opportunity arose. Then, though, it was simply a crush that could go nowhere. And now, it's a crush bordering on something much bigger, and it could go somewhere. When Shouto has absolutely no problem with waiting a little longer for Izuku to adjust to the loss of his bond before making his move. What's another month or two of keeping his feelings hidden, when until the battle trials he'd assumed he'd have to hide them for their entire school career? Before Shouto's brain can latch onto a new thought for him to mull over, he's called out to the arena to face off against the girl with the plant hair from Class 1B. She makes an odd, airy statement about having the favor of a certain deity that's assured her victory, and then the fight begins. And then it ends, because Shouto encases her and her vines in ice, just like he did Sero in the first match. He's tempted to make a comment about whichever deity she believed had blessed her for the fight being occupied with something else. Gods, Shouto imagines, are likely very busy creatures, but worrying she'll take it as mockery, he keeps his mouth closed as he offers her a very shallow bow, acknowledging her skill despite her rapid defeat. She walks off the field beside him, muttering under her breath about how she must have done something damning to cause her divine benefactor to abandon her, while Shouto bites his tongue to keep his words hostage in his mouth. Shiozaki sounds rather fragile, and he would hate to worsen her mood by saying the wrong thing, as he has a tendency to do in unfamiliar situations. "Shouto," a familiar booming voice says, and as much as Shouto has no idea what to say or how to handle Shiozaki's religious self-flagellation, he would rather deal with that than the man standing a few paces ahead of him. "Father," he greets coldly. As Shouto approaches him in the tunnel beneath the stadium, Izuku can't help but frown at his countenance. There is a hardness, a bitter defiance there that certainly wasn't there before, and he has a feeling he knows exactly who it came from. "Shokun," he greets quietly, offering his friend a small smile. To his great joy, the heterochromatic boy returns the gesture, something he's been doing more and more of lately, as he comes out of his shell, or at least comes out of his shell in the presence of Izuku and the rest of their little group alone. If he's still able to manage a smile, whatever happened can't be all bad, Izuku tells himself as Shouto mumbles his own hello and moves to stand shoulder to shoulder with Izuku. "You spoke to your sperm donor, didn't you?" Izuku asks, though it's really more of a statement than a question since Izuku knows what his friend looks like on the days Endeavor is laid into him about this or that. He looks exactly as he does right now. Brows pulled together slightly with a furrow between them, lower lip a stronger pink than the top one from being bitten out of stress, and eyes flickering between emotional exhaustion and utter disdain. Shouto nods and Izuku hums in acknowledgement, very tentatively slipping his hand into Shoto's left palm. It's something he's been experimenting with when it's just the two of them. Casual touch that can be easily escaped, focused on the side of Shoto's body that scares him. As usual, his friend tenses for a moment before relaxing and adjusting his own hand so that their shared grip is more comfortable. Their names are called by midnight, and they share a quick but deep glance into one another's eyes before pulling their hands apart and marching onto the field. They've already agreed that no matter who comes out on top, there'll be no hard feelings on the loser's part at the end of the fight, which means there are no words to say. Just yet, anyway. Izuku has plenty to say to Shouto about how idiotic his stance on the left side of his quirk is, but he's waiting for the exact right moment to say it, to ensure maximum impact. All he has to do is drag their match into a battle of attrition, and he'll have his friend exactly where he wants him, exactly where Shouto needs to be, in order for Izuku to get him over this perceived, unclearable hurdle in his heroic development. Midnight's whip raises into the air, and Izuku's focus narrows down to just him and the beautiful boy across from him. Everything else is inconsequential. Shouto clenches his jaw, refusing to let the muscles go lax and give away that he's already so cold his teeth are chattering. Izuku is dodging every offensive maneuver Shouto makes, sidestepping and jumping and twirling out of the path of Shoto's eyes again and again. If Shouto were simply watching him do it as a spectator, he'd be incredibly impressed with the agility and speed, but as the opponent trying to land a damn hit on the boy, it's more than a little irritating. It's honestly a good thing Shouto cares about Izuku so much, or he's not sure their friendship could survive the levels of annoyance their match is creating. Shouto knows that if Izuku didn't try his hardest, he'd be offended, thinking that the other boy gave him the win out of misplaced pity as the only one who knows the entire sad story of the Todorokis, from the quirk marriage to the unmarking to the abuse and torture disguised as training. So, Shouto really is glad, deep down, very, very deep, that Izuku's giving their fight his all. Someone he respects as both a person and hero in training is showing him respect in return, and that's nothing to turn your nose up at, especially if you're Shouto, and respect for you as a person as opposed to a Todoroki has always been in disappointingly short supply. But that doesn't negate the fact that if Shouto doesn't take the win soon, he's going to end up with at least a bad case of frostbite, maybe even hypothermia. "You look a little cold, Shouto," Izuku calls out as he flicks his index finger, the force generated turning Shoto's eyes into glittering dust. Despite the fact he's in a bit of a daze over Izuku dropping the honorific for the first time, heart-warming at the implied familiarity, even more all-encompassing than when they switched to first names after surviving the USJ side by side and the distance of family names felt unsuitable for the closeness the experience forged between them. Unfortunately, not actually warming him up, sadly, and is filled with pride at the sight of Izuku flicking his fingers with his quirk active without injuring himself thanks to the time Shouto had spent giving him training pointers. The primary thing Shouto is feeling, following the taunt, is utter infuriation. "That's what this is about," he demands, raising his voice to be heard over the roaring whoosh that Izuku's quirk generates. "You're trying to get me to use my flames." When Izuku grins at him, sheepish but unrepentant, Shouto glares at him balefully and sends a nastily jagged block of ice his way, which inevitably turns to nothing more than mist with a twitch of his opponent's fingers. "Why? Why would you do this when you know why I don't use them? Why I hate them so much?" Leaping into the air, Izuku dodges a fast-moving but distinctly smaller ice shard. Shouto knows just by looking at it that his exhaustion is finally starting to get to him, that his quirk is beginning to tire. "Because you're better than being so arrogant and careless as to only use half the weapons at your disposal, Shouto-kun. If an innocent child's safety was at stake and you could only save her with your fire, what would happen if you didn't know how to use them? You could hurt someone, jeopardize someone's safety, maybe even get a bystander killed. You know, to be a better hero than him, you need every advantage you've got." "If I use his quirk to beat him, then I haven't beaten him," Shouto roars, narrowly avoiding being blown out of bounds by a gust of wind from the other side of the arena. "If I give in and use his quirk, he wins." "You know, Shouto-kun," Izuku yells. "I thought you were smarter than this, I really did." "Smarter than what?" Izuku growls at him, actually growls with irritation before flicking 3 fingers at once, the gust so strong Shoto's head slams painfully into the ice wall he hastily threw it behind himself to prevent being thrown out of the arena. "It's your quirk, not his." Something in Shoto's chest jolts, and then he's 4 years old, watching All Might on TV with his mother. "Yes, that's right. Children often do inherit quirks from their parents or develop similar power sets. But the most important thing to remember is that a quirk is what you make of it. Regardless of your history, you decide how you use it. That's what I mean when I say I am here. Only you can decide to become a hero, no one else. Take this to heart, kids. You've got it. Another jolt, and he's curled up in his mother's lap, crying into her chest, clinging to her shirt with tiny, desperate hands. I don't want to, Mom. Please, I don't want to be the kind of guy he is. I don't want to be someone who bullies you and hurts people, Mom. His mother's hand, soft and reassuring, stroking over his hair and smoothing repetitive motions. But, honey, you do still want to be a hero, don't you? Jolt, and he's yawning, standing in the doorway to the kitchen, listening to his mother break down on the phone because she sees too much of her abuser and her children. And Shouto, that child's left side sometimes looks unbearable to me. All I can see is his father. Jolt, and he's back in front of the TV, his mother beside him, staring up at a widely smiling All Might with pure, unfiltered awe. You do still want to be a hero, don't you? Just remember, stay true to yourself. Shouto swallows thickly, the lump in his throat far too large. I didn't realize how much I'd forgotten. He thinks to himself, mourning the joy some of those memories could have brought him, if only he hadn't mentally packed his mother away in a corner to be forgotten about, in the recesses of his mind. His chest jolts again, and he's 5 years old, one side of his face bandaged while his father rants and raves about Shouto's mother being a moronic woman for hurting him at such an important time. Where did Mama go? Huh? She hurt my masterpiece, so I put her in the hospital to keep you safe. He's back, in the kitchen now, staring at his mother's back uncertainly. He doesn't want to keep listening, because his mother doesn't sound like she usually does, like she loves him, but he can't seem to run away either. I can't raise him anymore. I want to run away from this life. Panic claws up 5-year-old Shouto's throat. He doesn't want his mother to go away. Mom, what are you saying? His mother startles at his voice, pulling the telephone away from her ear as the kettle on the stove whistles at a high pitch, steam billowing from the spout. When his mother turns around, her eyes don't look right. With a jolt, he's looking down at his siblings playing in the courtyard, wondering why he can't play ball with them before his father clamps a large hand around his slender wrist and drags him away. Ignore them, Shouto. They live in a different world than the one I'm training you for. Shouto's legs aren't long enough to keep up with his father's long stride at age 4, so he stumbles and trips along behind his father, bare feet getting scraped by the wooden decking beneath them as he goes. Jolt. He's back to the day his father told him his mother had been sent away, little shoulders hunched with impotent anger. That was your fault. You're the one who made her hurt me. And it's true. Shouto knows it. His mother would have never broken enough to hurt any of her children without his father's abuse being heaped onto her day in and day out. He so desperately wants to reject that man, to prove that he can be great without a single look at the Todoroki fire that Enji is so proud to wield. But then, jolt. It's the second time he's eaten lunch with Izuku, and instead of bombarding him with questions about Endeavor, Izuku's asking about his ice. Have you ever seen that old Disney movie with Elsa in it? I mean, I know from the battle trials that your quirk has plenty of power, but can you create things that require focus on detail instead, like Elsa? Shouto's never seen any Disney film because his old man considers that kind of thing a frivolous waste of his masterpiece's time, which he tells his new lunch companion with slightly more delicate phrasing. Izuku does not judge or look at him pityingly. Instead, he beams at Shouto. Then we can watch it together at some point, and you can see if you can work your quirk like Elsa works her magic. I mean, if you want to, that is. You don't have to. I shouldn't have presumed. Midoriya, relax. I think I'd like that. Both watching the film and exploring a different way to use my quirk. His chest jolts yet again, and for a second, Shouto's curiosity is piqued by the way he can feel the building heat in the skin there. But he's pulled into another memory before he can examine the feeling too closely. Ida had spent lunch talking about how inspired he was by his brother Ingenium and how much his brother supports and loves him. It had Shouto drowning in jealousy as he recalled every time his father had looked at him like an assassin would a weapon, and nothing like a parent would their child. And of course, Izuku noticed. So Shouto told him everything, about the half of his quirk he refused to use, about the training he'd endured since he was oh so young and small, about the way the number 2 hero was a monster who destroyed lives, and how much Shouto hated that no one else could see it. I'm going to burn my Endeavor merch when I get home. Just like that? Just like what, Todoroki-kun? Just like that, you believe me and take my side. Of course. You forget, Todoroki-kun, I didn't exactly grow up happy thanks to Bakugo. You have the same look in your eyes when you talk about your dad that I used to if I thought about Bakugo and caught my reflection somewhere. So yes, just like that, I believe you, and I'm on your side. Jolt. The feel of the heat on his skin, of his chest increasing, and then he's in the USJ, having fallen into the landslide zone with Izuku. Despite his however calm, inside, he's terrified something bad will happen to his friend. He's never had a friend before, and even though he has quite a few now, Izuku was first. Izuku also is still struggling to use his recently developed quirk. He told Shouto about the limb-shattering disaster in his entrance exam, and Shouto managed to convince him to focus on using it differently, spreading the power through his whole body and flicking his fingers to create a wind force, but against the deluge of villains that are surrounding him, it might not be enough to keep Izuku unharmed. So Shouto reacts, and his ice spreads out eagerly, engulfing the majority of the villains in their area in thick, unbreakable ice. He refuses to allow Izuku to be hurt if he can help it. It's time to question the lowlifes and gather some information. Todoroki, duck! And Shouto does, because Shouto trusts Izuku more than he's trusted anyone before, and it's really not the right time, but the realization makes a smile tug on his lips anyway, and a large body sails through the air where Shoto's head would have been, without Izuku's warning, and when he looks in the direction it came from, Izuku is standing there, having clearly thrown a full punch based on his positioning. Are you crazy? What if you had broken your arm again? I wouldn't have cared. He was trying to attack you from behind, and I was moving before I could even think. Satisfying warmth unfurls in his gut, the knowledge that his friend feels as instinctively protective towards him as he does towards Izuku fills him with joy. All right, I understand, and thanks for watching my back, Midoriya. Yeah, well, I couldn't let anything happen to you. Better that my arm ends up at a cast than you getting a spear shoved through you. So, I'll watch your back while you handle the main offense, okay? You trust me that much, to be responsible for both our safeties that way. Are you kidding? You could light up the fire that you never use right now, and I'd trust you not to burn me. Letting you take point is nothing. You're my best friend. Of course I trust you to keep us safe. Shouto feels the jolt again, and dear God, his chest is so hot now. Heated to the point it should feel painful, but instead, it feels good, incredible, in fact, and he's back in the present. Izuku stands across from him, green eyes blazing with certainty, and his words replay in Shoto's mind. Your quirk, not his. And Shouto bursts into flames. But he doesn't attack, and neither does Izuku because before either of them can move, something golden and glowing slams into their chests. An overwhelming feeling of peace and belonging, of acceptance and adoration, spreads through Shouto, and just as his eyes are fluttering and his consciousness begins to waver, he looks down at his chest and sees a mark through the partially burned-away fabric of his shirt. A mark that definitely was not there when he put the shirt on at the start of the day. It's a butterfly, one wing half white and half red, the other wing the same green as Izuku's eyes. Just as he's passing out, an ethereal, multi-layered voice whispers, You both deserve this gift of a fresh start. Do not waste it, Todoroki Shouto. And then unconsciousness claims him completely. Katsuki watches, stunned into silence like every single other person in the arena, as something so rare it's considered a true miracle occurs. Fate gifts Deku and Peppermint with a freshly forged soul bond. No one knows why it happens or what makes fate choose the people it happens to. Katsuki sure as shit doesn't know what prompted fate to choose those two for something so unheard of, and he really wants to say he doesn't care either. But in the privacy of his own mind, he admits that it hurts more than he can comprehend. Actually, he cares a lot, because did it have to be Todoroki? Did it have to be the guy who everyone seems to love despite his lack of personality? The guy who he's heard Raccoon Eyes call the most good-looking guy in their class, for fuck's sake? The small kernel of hope he was secretly nurturing, regarding finding a way to make Deku start looking at him like he used to, is crushed to dust. It doesn't matter what Katsuki does now, because with a shiny new mark connecting Deku to Icy Hot, there's no way he can regain the nerd's attention and affection. After standing around stupidly for a long minute, Midnight calls for the transportation bots, and Cementos helps her load the two passed-out idiots onto the stretcher so they can be ferried off to the infirmary. President Mike seems to recover from his own shock and tells the audience that the faculty will be taking a moment to discuss what just happened and how to proceed, so everyone should just use the next 10 minutes or so to go to the bathroom or grab a snack. Just before the microphone is switched off, Hobo-sensei's voice is heard saying "what the fuck" in an impressively flat and incredulous tone, which seems to wake the spectators up from their own stupefaction as thousands of voices sound out at once. Katsuki sits in silence still, as Pikachu and Ashido screech about what just happened in the seats behind him, and Cheeks loudly sobs about nobody deserves a miracle like this more than Deku-kun and Todo-kun to Ida. He has nothing to add to any of the conversations happening around him. What's he supposed to say? Super thrilled my ex-soulmate just got bonded to the asshole I've seen as my primary competition and been secretly jealous of since school started? Yeah, fucking right. Before, Candy Cane had it all when it came to heroics. Trained by a real pro-hero from birth, powerful and versatile quirk, knowledgeable about pro-hero work and the laws that govern the career. Got in through recommendation, and already a known name thanks to his dad. Katsuki hated him for those advantages, despised that Peppermint was seen as having more potential than him. But at least he had Deku. Icy Hot had no friends. Katsuki had a soulmate. That at least had a quirk now, and a gang of idiots that basically assigned themselves as his friends with no input from him. That alone proved Katsuki was likely to have a higher popularity rank than the half-and-half bastard. And then he didn't. No more Deku. No more friends other than Shitty Hair. Suddenly, Icy Hot had Deku and his own gaggle of pals. Suddenly, Katsuki felt more alone than he ever had in his life. Something vital carved from his chest and burned from his skin because he kept hurting the gift fate gave him at birth. And he's coped okay, because Shitty Hair is more loyal than a damn Labrador. There was always the potential for re-winning Deku's heart, too. Becoming aware of what he had when Deku's mark still sat on his calf was fucking disorienting, but it woke him up, gave him a goal to work towards alongside his dream of becoming #1, and Katsuki always works best with a goal. Goes after it with furious tenacity and never lets up. And it feels like fate saw that intention and said, "Fuck you, Bakugou Katsuki, because now Deku's soul is bonded to Icy Hot's." "Are you all right, Bakubro?" Katsuki chokes out a hoarse, humorless laugh. "Stupid fucking question, Shitty Hair," he rasps. "Anything I can do to help?" Thinking about it, Katsuki knows that only time will do him any good. If it was possible, he'd go back in time and smack his younger self around some. Tell him how losing Deku feels like losing a part of what makes Katsuki who he is, that even without a quirk, he's Katsuki's soulmate, and he needs to stuff his ego down deep enough to accept the importance of that bond. He'd even settle for making it known that Deku gets his quirk eventually, because even though he'd be treating the nerd well for the wrong reasons, he's sure he'd get his shit together enough to realize everything he knows now after a while. Time travel quirks don't exist, right, Kirishima? To his credit, the muscular boy barely reacts to his actual name being used other than to flash a brief, sharp-toothed smile before he registers the question and sobers. Nah, dude. As far as I know, no quirk like that has ever been registered. Katsuki nods. He expected as much. He should know better than to hope after fate squashed his hopes of winning the nerd back so thoroughly. Then no. There's nothing you can do to help, he answers with a self-deprecating chuckle. If I can't go back in time, I'll just have to let the time lying ahead of me heal me up as I go. Fucking sucks, but what else is there to do? Kirishima claps a hand on Katsuki's shoulder, squeezing slightly in a comforting manner. It might suck, but I don't think the Bakugou I met on the first day of class would be handling this in such a manly, mature way. Maybe that's a silver lining, man. You've been hurt, but you're gonna heal better than you were before, you know? Katsuki hums in consideration. Maybe, he allows. But I sure as shit am not mature enough to handle seeing Icy Hot up close right now, so if he comes up here, I'm relying on you to hold me back, Shitty Hair. Snorting, even as he grins, Kirishima nods. That I can do, Bakubro. That I can do. Izuku's fingers, calloused from his work on the beach and slightly sore from their repeated use during the festival, trace over the large, colorful mark on his chest reverently. Ever since he woke up in the infirmary, he hasn't been able to stop touching it. Shouto is still asleep. Recovery Girl says the strain of a new bond snapping into place is what knocked them both out. But because Shouto was bordering on quirk exhaustion and overuse when it happened, he'll be out for longer than Izuku was. Which is okay. It's pretty good, in fact, because Izuku needs time to process. Fate forging a new bond is rare. Izuku's read every study on bonds, fate, and marks that he can in an attempt to find out if his bond with Bakugo was faulty, because why else would his soulmate hate and hurt him so much? So he knows what an honor it is to bear this new mark on his chest. Secondary bonds, according to research, are typically stronger than bonds which exist from birth. Peer-reviewed papers note that secondary bonds are always forged with bigger, brighter marks than from birth soul marks, and statistically, couples whose bonds are forged by fate later in their lives are happier and more naturally compatible than couples whose bond has been with them since birth. It is suspected this is because it's fate's way of apologizing for the initial bond failing however it did, though obviously, without somehow asking fate, this can't be confirmed. Izuku has been feeling a draw toward Shouto since the USJ, which he refused to look at too closely because it felt like a betrayal of his former bond to Bakugo, but now Izuku realizes it was fate, beginning the process of stitching their souls together with whatever cosmic thread they use for such tasks. It's a pretty picture, Izuku thinks. Stars, planets, moons, quasars, and comets carefully stitched through his and Shouto's souls, tying the deepest parts of them together for the rest of their days. Get back on track before Shokun wakes up. His brain prompts him far too amusedly. Izuku doesn't object because, well, his brain is right. Now isn't the time to let his imagination take the wheel. So, he's bonded to Shouto now. He saw the butterfly on Shouto's partially exposed chest before the golden glow knocked him out. And he saw Shouto smiling pretty damn goofily down at it, too. So he doubts his friend is upset about this new development. Izuku certainly doesn't object to it. Shouto understands him in a way no one else ever has before, and he openly accepts and welcomes Izuku's little oddities that Bakugo always hated, like Izuku's analysis or his mumbling. Izuku trusts Shouto, and if he'll allow himself to be a little superficial for a minute, since it's just him and his brain to hear it, Shouto is incredibly pretty. Almost ridiculously so. Did fate tip a double portion of attractiveness into the mix when they were creating Shouto? Sure seems like it, with the cute round cheeks and the adorable smile and the beautiful eyes, and Izuku stops himself there, because, honestly, he'll still be describing how gorgeous Shouto is tomorrow, if he just lets himself carry on. The facts are these. They are soulmates now. Izuku has no lingering romantic feelings for Bakugo, even if he would like to have him back as a friend one day. Shouto seemed happy about it too. And they didn't get to finish their fight. So, when Sho wakes up, as long as he is happy about their bond, they should tackle the fight thing first so they can focus on their new bond and peace afterwards. It's a lot to adjust to, even if they both see it as a good thing. Izuku glances at Shouto's passed-out form in the bed next to his and leans over to brush his hair out of his eyes gently after using the bear's flicker of his quirk to pull the beds flush against each other. He never really thought he'd find anything he cared more about than proving his worth as a wielder of One for All, but as he looks down at Shouto, he knows he'd give the quirk up in a second if he needed to for the beautiful, both inside and out, boy that he's now bonded to. There's cosmic thread through our souls now, Shokun, he muses aloud, speaking to himself around a completely uncontrollable grin of pure joy. I think you can drop the honorific now, all things considered, Izuku, says the quiet, tired voice of his soulmate, and Izuku chokes out a happy sob. Sure thing, Sho. Shouto smiles that same, slightly dazed smile he wore just before he passed out at Izuku, and suddenly, finishing the sports festival feels entirely unimportant to Izuku. Also, cosmic thread, Shouto asks, eyes sparkling with amusement. Izuku chuckles sheepishly. Ah, just thinking out loud about this happening, and how fate probably stitches bonds together and so on. Also about the fact we didn't technically finish our fight, he explains. Wrinkling his nose up, Shouto hums before answering. I concede. You win. Izuku goggles at him. You what? No, you can't, because I concede more. You deserve to move on to the finals more than me, Sho. You concede more, Shouto repeats flatly. That is not a thing. Is too, Izuku argues stubbornly. Shouto shakes his head just as stubbornly, and Izuku squints down at him, wondering how he can win the argument, because as far as he's concerned, Shouto absolutely has to be the one who makes it to the finals after he finally broke his fire out. An idea makes its presence known in the forefront of Izuku's mind, and he doesn't even spare it a second of analysis before enacting it. Closing the distance between them, he stabilizes himself by placing one palm flat on the pillow beside Shoto's head, and then their lips are together, Izuku's nose brushing Shoto's petal-soft cheek as he kisses and kisses and kisses him. His soulmate. And then Shoto's got his hands fisted in Izuku's top, holding him close so that he can't retreat, kissing back like it's his purpose in life. When they finally separate, Izuku knows his cheeks probably match the left side of Shouto's hair, and he feels almost weightless with happiness, but retains just enough brain function to remind himself that there was a purpose behind what he just did. "Let me concede, Shouto," he murmurs, eyes pleading. Shouto finally opens his and stares up at Izuku, blinking slowly as if coming out of a trance before making a noise and nodding slightly. Izuku grins. Victory. "Well, you two are clearly feeling better," comes Recovery Girl's thoroughly amused voice from the doorway. They jerk apart, Izuku's blush intensifying as Shouto's cheeks go a very satisfactory pink color that Izuku will absolutely be trying to provoke into existence again at some point, and the short healer shakes her head at them fondly. She gives them a cursory check-over for injuries, even though they really didn't manage to hurt each other much at all during their match, and then Izuku tells her to get one of the teachers so he can inform them that he's bowing out, and Shouto is continuing on, making it official. Ha, he thinks, just as Shouto finally breaks out of the kiss daze he's remained in until now. Shouto scowls at him adorably. "You cheated," he accuses. Izuku nods because, yes, he kind of did. He regrets nothing. "You owe me," Shouto says. "I'm due recompense." Izuku nods again, because sure, he'll give Shouto whatever he wants, with pleasure. Shouto wants his sperm donor's head on a platter. Izuku's on it, one murder and mutilation of a corpse charge coming right up if it'll make his soulmate happy. "I expect more of those," Shouto tells him seriously. Izuku blinks. "More of what?" "Kisses. It was very enjoyable." "That's all you want?" "Yes. Kisses at a high frequency whenever I want one." His soulmate informs him with all the superiority of an emperor on his throne. A grin breaks onto Izuku's face. "Done and done," he replies. "However, specifically, I would like another one when I'm standing on the winner's podium at the end of the sports festival." "Huh? I mean, sure, fine, but why then specifically?" "It will infuriate my father, as well as inform the majority of the country that you're mine. There is no downside." Shouto tells him completely serious. Izuku barks a laugh of surprise, even as something hot coils in his stomach, at Shouto declaring Izuku his. "Then it will be my pleasure to give in to your demands," says Izuku, winking at Shouto and watching with delight as the pretty pink flush comes back in response. As Shouto stands on the highest podium, he makes eye contact with his soulmate, something he doesn't think he'll stop mentally repeating for a while because Izuku is his soulmate now, and allows himself a small smile in anticipation of what's to come. The medals are placed around their necks by All Might, and then, as soon as All Might steps off Shouto's podium, Izuku moves forward, breaking out of his spot in the crowd and hopping up onto Shouto's podium with a quirk-powered jump. There's clapping from the crowd, and Midnight is rambling on about how romantic it is that they don't even want to be apart for 10 minutes, folks. You've got to love that fate brought them together. And then Izuku arches an eyebrow at him. "You sure you want this show?" Shouto smirks slightly and nods. He knows that they are, as Izuku phrased it, stitched together with cosmic thread, but he still wants everyone to get a nice visual reminder of it. His soulmate is extremely attractive, so Shouto thinks it's perfectly rational to want to assert his claim on him in front of basically the whole nation. "Damn right I do." Shrugging amiably, Izuku leans forward, one hand cupping the back of Shouto's head, fingers threading through his hair as his other hand slides around Shouto's waist, and then Izuku is kissing him, and Shouto is consumed by the feeling of home, mind, love, acceptance, happiness, belonging, adoration that flows between them. And as he wraps both of his arms around Izuku's neck and holds him closer, unconcerned with the screaming audience or the thrilled squealing of Midnight, Shouto swears he hears the same multi-layered voice from earlier, laughing happily. All right, listeners, this concludes the one-shot Cosmic Thread Through Our Souls. I think the author does such a wonderful job with this fic, and I'm a sucker for a good soulmate AU. Let me know your all's thoughts and reactions to this one if you like the fic, or this goes for, as always, any of the other fics on this channel as well. Be sure if you have time to slide over to AO3 or whatever platform I found the fic on, and leave kudos or comments to the original authors as well. Show your support. I'm sure it's always appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.